Cameron George, founder and operator of True Kava, and this is a Q&A with a Kava professional.
Is kava considered safe for regular or daily use?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. So kava has been used for over 3,000 years by entire cultures in the South Pacific daily by 90% of the population in island countries like Fiji or Vanuatu, which is like a country that's 80 miles west off the coast of Fiji. It's a daily substance with virtually no negative net health consequences. So it's very, very safe to use regularly. It is a substance that is completely natural because it's a whole food, medicinal, but yet safe recreational substance. It doesn't elicit any addiction, dependency, habituation, withdrawal, toxicity, or even impairment of any kind. It really just brings about a state of hyper-sobriety, right? It's an optimized, functional peak flow state. So it's safe for regular use. Because it has a whole food medicinal component to it, it actually is an incredibly powerful neuro and tissue protective substance because of its natural active ingredients that are like lipid-like oils called cavalactones. And these cavalactones are some of the most powerful neuro and tissue protective substances in all of the ethnobotanical literature. That just means like plant-based, scientific studies and literature, where it hits on almost every neuro and tissue protective pathway that we know of. So that means anti-inflammatory pathways, similar to the ones that are hit by non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like aspirin, ibuprofen. But then, also it actually helps to upregulate your body's own antioxidant systems like glutathione, peroxidase, and superoxide dismutase. It also, through this calming inhibitory system in the brain, the main brakes of the nervous system that we call GABA, it helps to actually calm down over-excitation that drives inflammation in the brain. We all heard, during the pandemic and stuff about cytokine storms, right? It's basically like the body's defense system is just going crazy, both from an immune standpoint, but also from a nervous standpoint. Kava is kind of a stabilizer of the neuroimmune system, and it helps to stabilize that cytokine activity in the brain. It helps to stabilize glutamate excessive activity, and glutamate is like the most excitatory neurotransmitter. Anything that causes a person to go into a convulsion or a seizure explodes glutamate. And that's why it can be used regularly without any, toxic burden whenever it's produced in its whole food form. You have to get the right parts of the plant. You have to make sure that it's not bacteria or mold contaminated. You have to make sure it's not contaminated with pesticides and all of that. But given that you get the correct material, it's an incredibly safe substance for regular use.
How does kava affect cognitive function, and what are the different methods of preparation?
Not only does kava not impair cognitive function, but it actually enhances it. So not only does it affect like the GABA system in the brain, but it also has a really powerful natural elevation and effect on the dopamine system. And dopamine is the primary chemical in the brain that elicits energy, motivation, concentration, passion, drive, and it's like the chemical of desire. Anything that hits dopamine is going to give you more mental clarity in the short term. But kava gives you that mental clarity. It doesn't affect dopamine like a psychostimulant like an Adderall or even like caffeine to some degree, or anything that's addictive, even like scrolling on your phone that gives you that sort of dopamine loop that stimulates the dump of dopamine, and you get that hit of pleasure and of like focus and of like elation about life. But then you're left depleted and wanting more because it's like it dumps and depletes, it dumps and depletes. Kava is actually able to affect the dopamine system through the monoamine oxidase pathway, where it's actually able to increase natural dopamine synthesis, production, and release. So it helps to replete and naturally elevate the dopamine. So afterwards, you're actually left with higher dopamine levels consistently over time. It's kind of like building that dopamine bank. So not only it's not addictive and it doesn't impair your function, but it actually brings about mental clarity that's sustainable across time. Not all kava is created equal, right? So there's different forms of kava. 95 to 98% of it comes from a form that we call kava, which is an extract form that actually isn't at all kava by definition or composition standards. It is a kava extract, a kava-like product that only carries a fraction of its therapeutic benefits and not all of its safety in all contexts. Traditional kava, true kava, like the stuff that we produce, we've commercialized the traditional preparation that's been used by that 90% of the culture in Vanuatu, in Fiji, South Pacific Island cultures for 3,000 years. So basically, it's the whole food extraction of the roots of this plant, Piper methysticum, which is the kava plant. How it's produced traditionally is the roots are ground down, it's put into a strainer bag, and then it's kind of kneaded into a bowl of warm or cold water over a number of minutes to even up to an hour, to where you're actually squeezing out this like full spectrum food. In the same way that coffee, for example, in its whole food form, right? It's like you just brew it every morning in your coffee maker. It's the water and pressure extraction of the beans of Coffea arabica, which is the coffee bean. Kava is the same. How we produce kava traditionally is similar to how you produce coffee, right? But most of those extracts, though, are basically like the caffeine powder of the kava world, right? So except for, at least with caffeine powder, you get an effect still. With kava extracts, not so much.
What guidance would you give to people who are considering kava as an alternative for stress or anxiety?
Source your material carefully. Why it's used so broadly is because they get the real stuff, basically, right? And so the magic is in the real stuff. It's an amazing medicine, but I can't think of a single medicine that's easier to screw up if you get it sourced incorrectly, extracted incorrectly, grown incorrectly, not get the right strains, or have it contaminated, right? So you have to get a traditional preparation if you really want to have the true kava experience. And so that means it needs to be something that's produced with only water and pressure extraction, and it needs to be something that's dried correctly and that's filtered correctly, to where you have that full matrix of active constituents that constitute what we call kava, in the same way with the coffee analogy, right? In order to end up with true kava. But then you also want to make sure that it's from strains that have been hybridized and grown consistently and used for thousands of years in Vanuatu and in Fiji for daily use. Because there are some strains that are kind of lower quality strains that are a little bit more sloppy in their effects profile. They have some more plant defense compounds that can cause inflammation and can cause a little bit of stomach upset. But if you get a traditional preparation of daily, what we call noble kava varieties, which are kind of like daily use, very smooth varieties of kava, and then you get it into a form that's easy to put into a glass that actually fits into your life. So you want to get into a form that tastes good, that's end user ready, that also is a true traditional extraction, and that's where the effects come from.
What's the tolerance difference between kava and alcohol?
They're on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the tolerance difference, right? Or the habituation, or the effects profile when it comes to addiction or dependency, or just habituation. So obviously most things that shift your mood and your state of mind on a dime are going to be things that sort of borrow from tomorrow's feel-good and functional chemistry to pay for today. So borrow from tomorrow's dopamine, the feel-good chemistry of passion and desire and arousal and all that stuff, to pay for today. Alcohol, Adderall, like, on the productivity front, or any drug, a benzodiazepine drug, all work on those principles. They're ingested, they're broken down in the body, they go up, they plug into receptors in the brain, or they stimulate a dumping of those chemicals, right? And anything that stimulates a dump of those chemicals, the body tries to respond and says, whoa, we have too much of this chemical, right, being dumped at one time, and it downregulates its own production. It reduces its own production because it's been overridden or hacked, and it's trying to balance itself out. And so because that's the effect, all of those substances have an effect we call tolerance. And that means the strongest the substance will ever be is the first time you take it, because that's when your bank is at its max. And it's never going to get any higher after that, because it only takes, right? Kava has completely different opposite because of plant pharmacology. Because it's biologically compatible, it's a natural organism, just like you're a natural organism. So it comes in that form to where it actually works with the body as a complex living organism with multiple nutritive, nourishing, active constituents that help to rebuild that reservoir of feel-good and productive chemistry. So it has what we call reverse tolerance. So instead of borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today, the kavalactones interact with receptors in the brain that wake them up and make them more sensitive over time. And they connect with the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of act as a reset that kind of, through multiple signaling systems, it helps to kind of reset the parasympathetic nervous system and gives it the correct signals to help it recover and rebuild itself. Through many mechanisms, it helps to increase the quality of sleep that you get, which helps to restore that indirectly. But it also directly, we know that over long-term administration, you actually see an increase in the receptor sites of these major feel-good chemicals. So that's why the Polynesians have always referred to it as reverse tolerance. And that means that the weakest kava will ever be is the first time you take it, even though it still hits most people the first time you take it. But it starts to build up as it gets you up to your optimal baseline. And then it levels off after about a month or two, and then you don't ever have to build up again. But it's just so unique and miraculous to be able to feel good when you take something and then feel good about feeling good, right? So I hope this Q&A was able to answer some of the most pressing questions about kava, right? There's a lot of information that's circulating out on social. Anytime something explodes like this, something that's kind of this prevalent, right? An actual alcohol alternative that actually works, people want to know, is it safe, is it effective, and all those things. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? Or just like a lot of, information that's untethered from reality, right? So people make a lot of things. So I hope this clears up some of the do's and don'ts.